So we just finished watching the budget speech, the medium-term budget speech. Byron, what are your views off the top of your head?
So we called this at the start of this. It would basically be more bailouts, more government spending, more BE, more state, whatever. And it's exactly as what we thought. I must admit, there was a lot of talk, but no real content. If you were to ask me for some actual facts and figures, there weren't any, mate. I just talked about some stuff that we need to do as a country. Infrastructure's failing. No one can actually do their job properly, and there's no contractors to go out there and do things because there's no skill. And even where you get a contractor, he fucks everything up. And there's no substance to it, man. There's no substance to it. Like we
No,
all know what the problems in
it's
this country are, but we all know how to get rid of them. Get rid of cater deployment. Get rid of BE. Balance your books properly. Don't be a bunch of corrupt fucks and everything will be much better. But where is that? It's never in the speeches.
no, it really isn't. So I'm trying to get the budget speech up here, but just into the details, this is such a mediocre speech for everyone involved. Basically, it's all about there's more bailouts because we have higher revenue than we expected. It's all about oh maybe we'll implement the full time social grant, the 350 a month forever and ever and ever. There's
Hmm.
marginal things like we'll increase the budget for this and maybe increase the budget for that, and we're going to look at the inefficiencies of the system and maybe we will change it, maybe we won't. It's all about the stakeholder engagement at the end of the day. But this is not a budget. This is a speech that is basically we hit the Titanic 10 years ago and, all we're going to do is just paddle for a bit longer. Like there's no reform whatsoever. There's nothing here to indicate any change of heart at all from the ANC. And therefore, our conclusion in terms of our previous video, in terms of saying South Africa won't exist by 2030, is holding on very, very strong because the ANC refuses to acknowledge A, the problems, and B, any solutions at all to the problems.
There were some figures muted. There was 2 million. There was 2 billion to rebuild Parliament.
Mm.
Okay, that's not going to be 2 billion. We all know that it's not going to get done on time. It's not going to get done within budget. The second thing that they talked about was they said that currently they are providing a lot of bulk electricity and water costs, which is basically the free shit they give to all their voters to bribe them. And that stuff is becoming too expensive to pay for now because of rising costs. So they need to find additional funds for that. The thing is, they don't say where that additional fund's going to come from. So likelihood is your raise in taxes are probably going to go up because you're going to have to fund all this fucking free shit. The next thing is, as I said, that we must have a self-sufficient and an economy that has its own economic growth. In other words, he says that we can't just have things that constantly just get free bailouts. This is the idea that basically state-owned enterprises should somehow be able to generate their own income and remain solvent. It's a really interesting thing that he says that because, well, everybody knows that. And he says that a lot of the problems with the state-owned enterprises is bad leadership and corruption. But then goes on to say that what we really need to do is now basically bail them out. And he talked about giving additional funds to Denel, Transnet, Sanrail, and he basically says that their business models and their long term financial viability needs to be well considered. But he
Yeah,
gives no comments on how this is going to get done.
yeah.
So
We
but
have
forget
sorry to
go for
interrupt.
it.
We have no confirmation at all on e-tolls, which is a 20 billion rand hole in
Hmm.
Sanrail's balance sheet. No inclination whatsoever to solve that problem, except a small bailout. No inclination to solve any form of problem with Eskom. We're going to get a small bailout, and then, but this bailout is different because we're going to determine how they're going to do it and what outcomes we want from that bailout. Okay, so fucking what? Number three, no determination on SAA. I assume that's over and dead in the water. No determination on NHI. I assume it's dead in the water. There's nothing there. Determination on this public sector wage bill. Oh, we're going to continue to bribe them an extra £1,000 cash every month until March of 2023. Then maybe we'll relook at how that is happening. It's kicking the can down the road for 15 years, and this is just a continuation of that. And the longer you kick
Yeah.
the can down the road, the more, well, I don't know what the analogy is, but there won't be a can.
Well, I
left.
mean, look, the interesting thing is he says that funding for the state-owned enterprises will come with what he says is pre and post conditions, and you'll only get your funding if you do that. But we all know that that's bullshit because you'll come to them with a condition which says you need to be more operational, or cut your speech. Then their unions will strike and they'll go, oh, okay, well, now we can't have that strike, so we'll just give you what you want anyway. So, that's bollocks. He says that, Transnet's going to get another 3 billion for out of service locomotives. Mate, your problem isn't out of service locomotives. It's the fact that there are no fucking rail lines because they all got stolen. So what are you going to do about that? So we're going to have a bunch of. I mean, do you remember when the prick got? We had just announced load shedding stage 6, and then the prick was like, "Oh, great, we got these electric trains." Like, well done. Okay, and now what? It's like there's no thinking here. He's like,
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
ah,
think about it this way, right? As we said in yesterday's video, Eskom needs 1.2 trillion rand just to survive till 2030. 1.2 trillion. They're getting what? A few billion now in a bailout with a few conditions. So it's like you need to pay 100,000 rand for cancer treatment. So let's pay like 50 rand now with the condition that you have to continue the cancer treatment. Otherwise, the 50 rand will disappear. Like, no one can give a shit about 50 rand at the end of the day. And that's exactly what they're doing. They just maintaining the status quo. They're out of ideas. They're out of policy. They're out of any intention of actually
but
running
it
the
shows.
country.
It shows, man.
It just seems to me like they just don't want to run this thing anymore. It's too much work. They fucked it up. They'd rather just retire. That's what it really looks like
Oh,
to me.
wouldn't you? I mean, I would. So,
Yeah.
I mean, you said that they didn't say anything about e-tolls. Well, you're right, they didn't. But there were some things they did say. So they did say that the government would contribute 30% of SANRAL's debt. Okay, well, what is that debt? Well, we don't know. It did also say that Gauteng would cover the cost of maintaining the 201 kilometers and associated intercharges of the roads. So does that mean they're basically pawning e-tolls onto the Gauteng government? Because that's not sustainable. Again, there's this distinct lack of detail here. They said that the government would take over, and I want you guys to listen to this, significant portion of Eskom's 400 billion debt. But he didn't tell us how much that is, but it's significant. So is that over 50%? Is that 200 billion? Because remember, just by you taking on the debt doesn't mean that Eskom is suddenly free. What it means is that Eskom still needs a fuck ton of money just to fix the infrastructure. Okay, fine, it won't have to pay its debt, but so what? It still needs money it doesn't have to fix the place. Which anybody who thinks about that is like, okay, I took out one credit card to pay another credit card. Now that credit card's paid off, but I still got a credit card to pay off, right? Like the money doesn't disappear.
Yeah.
In fact, now you've got 2 credit cards of debt to pay.
Work it out for like minutes time as possible.
But one thing he did mention is that they're funding an additional 15,000 constables. Not being funny, mate, but I think the last time we ran the figures, and that's 15,000 over 3 years. You know what that doesn't take into account? How many police officers are in the police force that are currently retiring, either due to the lack of the police force being a sustainable career option, or it being a place that you just don't want to work because you don't get paid sometimes, and it's you don't get equipment and bullets for your guns.
And I mean, based on that, we know police officers, they haven't received an increase in 3 years, right? And now you want to recruit 5,000 extra ones for the
Well,
next...
15,000 over the next 3 years.
So 5,000 a year, in other words.
Yeah. Well, possibly.
Yeah, the attrition rate is much higher than that of police leaving
Much
the
higher.
service. And most importantly, those people aren't going to stick around when they don't get, annual increases in the first place. So it's another pointless exercise. It looks good on paper, 15,000 officers. So what? We only got 150,000 officers. We've got 500,000 security guards.
It's
And they
football.
recruit them
It's
all the time.
football. Correct. And so if you look at it from that perspective, you have to go, okay, well, how many police officers do we actually need to run this country? Well, I'm telling you, 15,000 extra ain't going to do fuck all. They're not going to do fuck all. Maybe that 15,000 is what you need for the Western Cape alone.
Yeah.
So
and that excludes ammunition costs, that excludes training, that excludes everything the police aren't doing at the moment. The police only shoot
Correct.
once a year, like 10 rounds at a target as competency. Like I shoot 10 rounds like in a minute, when I'm on the range. They do it once a year.
I know.
All bullshit.
And this is why we say there's no real detail here. It's a budget that sounds great. I can't imagine that the markets are going to respond positively to this. I can see that all the financial analysts are going to be thinking the same shit we are. The final thing he ended off with is around the grey listing. And he goes, oh, we're doing some great things. You need to be careful with that supposed great things, because one of the things that they're doing is the anti-terror bill. And the anti-terror bill could mean that Roman and I go to jail as terrorists because we criticize the government.
Yeah.
That is actually one of the clauses in that bill. So they've taken a bill that they deem to be necessary for the grey listing, and they've, in typical fashion, they've overextended it, and the actual definitions included in it, some of them are unconstitutional, and some of them are open to abuse, which means that even if they pass this shit, who cares? It's going to Constitutional Court. And it's not going to have an impact. In which case, the desired result that it needs to have to stop the grey listing is not going to happen, which means we're still going to get grey listed.
Because we know exactly what is causing the grey listing. It's not the lack of laws, it's the lack of application of the laws. It's the lack of the bite of the MPA. It's the lack of arrest and persecution, or prosecution rather, of guilty parties. Banning Bain and co from doing work with the government for 10 years is just not going to fucking cut it. And calling everyone a terrorist and jailing myself and Byron is also not going to cut it. So to prevent the grey listing, they're putting in bullshit bills that really, really, really impact our human rights, and not actually doing the real work to prevent the grey listing in the first place. So they're using it as a mechanism to just centralize more power to themselves. Simple as that.
100%. And it's not fixing the MPA. There was no extra budgets for the MPA. Ramaphosa obviously talked about some extra bull crap he was going to do as part of state capture, which the ANC still fails to say that was us. Like, they had perfect opportunity, and we even said it. Like, you say the silent part out loud. It's you that fucked up. Yeah, admit it, own it. And, they're still not doing that. But the net result is that when these bullshit laws go and get passed, they are going to go to the Constitutional Court. The Constitutional Court is going to have to review them, because civil society as a whole, people like you and me, Ramon, we'll get civil society to refer the shit, because we don't want to go to jail just for saying we think the government's cack. So, at the end of the day, it's going to go there, which means that those laws cannot be applied, even if they want them to, in enough time to escape the grey listing, in which case the grey listing is going to happen.
Yeah.
Now, the way that they're trying to get around that is a couple of Watis have had their properties seized because of state capture. But everybody knows, and we covered this even in our grey listing videos, the major problems aren't a couple of Watis here and there. They're the ANC cadres who are taking money abroad like there's no tomorrow, because they stole all of the municipalities' money and offshored it all in Dubai. There's a former president's son who lives in Dubai, a very luxurious lifestyle, even though that president never had any money, he didn't come from money, and he never worked an actual day in a commercial enterprise. So all of his money was, lo and behold, generated by the state.
Yeah.
Well, where do you think that money came from?
Yeah. So in essence, and in conclusion, this budget does nothing to prevent the grey listing. It does nothing to prevent any further decay of South Africa. It doesn't prevent any negation of any scenario that makes South Africa worse tomorrow than it is today. So basically the budget was a complete waste of time, and you should really thank us for watching it on your behalf.
Yeah, you probably should. Although, just to re-highlight something that we said at the start of us watching this stupid thing, is that we did a video about how South Africa is going to break apart, and we just got loads of and then you told us we should stay. yes, you should stay because South Africa will crumble, the existing state of play will fall away, and there will be chaos. But in that chaos is opportunity. It's opportunity to form your own culture, your own identity, to reform a society as you want to see it. That's where the opportunity is, and that's why we're staying.
Yeah, hashtag I'm staying, because chaos is actually the reason why we're staying, not because we are hopeful or optimistic about a better future. No, we're going to create the future. We already are creating it, Byron and I, in various ways, and you can create it as well by staying here.
Absolutely.
Because believe me, it's much easier to make money here and become rich here than it is almost anywhere else in the world, and live a good life with that. By the way, you don't want to be rich in London because you're not rich. You want to be rich.
I love my country, man. I love my country. It's a fantastic place to be. And if it wasn't for, there's a brilliant line in Blood Diamond, and that is Africa's the best place on the best place on the planet to live. It's a shame about the people, and it's a great line because it's the people that fuck up Africa, and in this instance, it's the politicians. So you have to think, well, every time the politicians fuck this place up a little bit more, I get happier. Not because I'm glad that the place is getting fucked up or that, but because I know it's one step closer to statelessness. It's one step closer to collapse. Once it collapses, the opportunities arise. Let's reform it. We cannot reform this place until it collapses. So you need to, every time you see it collapse, be glad, rejoice.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, mitigate against it, of course. And if you've been following us for a while, you would understand that, how to mitigate
But
it.
that's mitigates against your personal consequences of it, the way that you personally feel it.
Yes.
But don't mitigate it in the state as a whole. Like, let it fall apart, mate. Like, once it collapses, the real reforms occur.
Yeah, and thankfully, we are not helping it collapse. It's doing it by itself. And this budget speech
100%.
is the perfect example of state collapse playing right before your very eyes. Thank you for watching,
100%.
everyone. See you soon.
Cheers.
Cheers.